Specialist 4, Paul Battaglia, United States Army, Vietnam. Folks, interviewed Paul in Scottsdale, Arizona just about a month ago, April 18, 2024. And he was an amazing man. He obviously was affected by Vietnam like a lot of the veterans are, but he told me a great story from his eyes and ears of what happened to him as a young man in Vietnam. Enlisted in the military in '63, was in Vietnam in 1968 with the 1st Field Forces, 2nd Battalion, A Battery. And Paul, God bless you. Thank you for opening up your heart to share with me. I know we're going to do another interview at some point, but you shared a lot, brother, and I think a lot of people will be touched by this interview that you gave me. I'm so blessed to be able to call you a friend. So, Michael and Darlene Surofsky, thank you for sponsoring and making it possible for me to go to Arizona and to interview Paul. Trish Kerr Hansen at Hansen Desert Hills in Scottsdale, where we did the interviews. Thank you, Trish, for another interview, another great story. Hope to work with you again soon. So both of you, all three of you, thank you so much for your love and support of my work and our veterans and just giving a darn for this country. I really appreciate you guys so much, so much. Thank you. Folks, I'm going to get right into it now. Paul's story went well over an hour. I know a lot of you like the longer stories. I just want to remind you that Voices of History Radio is still out there. I would encourage you to tune into it. Get this app into the hands of our young people, have living history in the palm of their hands. Voices of History Radio. Go to the App Store, download it for free. Go to larrycappetto.com. You can watch and listen to it for free there on my homepage. And I just want to thank all of you that are helping to support that radio station and my work here, my ministry here with this YouTube channel. You know it's a ministry, it's a labor of love. Got some things coming up this year, going to be traveling again soon, and just really looking forward to just the history of these stories that is so important in the day we live in. As people would try to erase the history, I'm their counterpart. I'm not going to allow it to happen. So God bless you. Thank you for watching, listening, subscribing to this channel, and I'll talk to you in my next broadcast. Enjoy Paul Battaglia.
Hey, while you're doing that, both of you, this is a coincidence. Today is April 18th.
Yeah, you told me about that in your email.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Jerry and for Larry, when I was in the 7th grade, I was always getting kicked out of class. I don't know why. I had a really neat teacher. And so the punishment was go outside, sit in a chair, and memorize this poem, Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So it's always meant something to me. And today particularly because it was the shot heard around the world and it changed the world. Those folks that fought for the revolution. Yeah, and for us.
Do you need those glasses on? Because there's a glare. Can you? Okay, that's good. That's good right there. First question, how old are you now?
78 years old.
And how old were you when you went to Vietnam?
23, I turned 24 in a rice paddy.
So when you were in high school, what year were you in high school? When
I graduated in 1963.
So Vietnam wasn't really going then.
But I can tell you, do you want me to talk about anything you say? Or yeah. If you get a script, go ahead.
No, I don't. I'm just saying,
come back to that.
I'm just wondering, when did you first start hearing about Vietnam?
Why did I do what?
When did you first start hearing about Vietnam?
The day Kennedy was shot. Now that sounds strange, but I'm going to tell you this. I was thinking about it on the way down, and I've thought about it many times. I had crammed for a test all night, and the next day I went to my dorm and snoozed on the Saturday morning after the test. About noon or sometime after, the door opened, some guy in the dorm came in and says, "Hey, Kennedy's been shot." And I went, looked at him, is that true? But I'll tell you, within minutes of contemplating that, I thought, Kennedy, you don't take a president out unless there's something bigger and more important to kill him. And I thought, he being Kennedy, just gotten through the Bay of Pigs confrontation with Russia. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is not a good sign. Somebody doesn't like what the president and the people who voted for him are doing, and they took his life. And at that point, I thought, oh, what's ahead now? Not the actual place, Vietnam. It hadn't even come to anybody's attention. Mm-hmm. And I thought, somebody made a big move to take out the guy that head of the country. So I wasn't quite at all surprised that we ended up over there.
So why did you join the military, or were you drafted?
No, I wasn't drafted. That's so I was. That was my first year of college, 63, 64, and so about 65, I went to a different college, and in a fraternity. And by that time, there were talks about a war, and some people against this. It had made 2 years of advancement. And so I'm talking to our guys that are my age. We're thinking, I wonder if this war is going to go anyplace, meaning get larger. And so everyone was thinking, what are we going to do? We're in college. I wanted to get my degree. That's what I was there for, and so were they. Turns out that some of them said, I don't want to be drafted, and I was in the same place. But remember, there was no draft at the time. So I said, well, if I have to go, I have to go. It's not a problem. I have pretty deep feelings of why I'm willing and wanted to go if needed. And a couple of guys, as I remember, just did a shortcut, and rather than finishing college, they enlisted. When I think about why I was so okay with going, was this: come from immigrant grandparents, early 1900, 1905, watch what their life became because they were in America. And because their life became this, I was able to enjoy an education. And I thought, well, also, in our age group, we saw the end of World War I was the war to end all wars. And then we saw World War II. And historically going back, and then we saw Korea. And you get the feeling that the wars just aren't ever over. And so I made up my mind there that, especially after knowing about the carnage in World War II recently, you know, not only the invasion on the beach, the D-Day, but as a young man, you're trying to figure out who you are and why you're here and what should you do. And I felt I should do that. So I think it was the beginning of my junior year. All these questions were coming up with all the guys, and there were the protests. And I said, one day I heard on the radio that a National Guard unit is taking people. I said, and I called my friend, I says, Gary, if you want to go in the National Guard, you're not active duty at the time. If they call you up, you're active duty and you go. He opted not. He actually, a year or so, enlisted and was an airplane mechanic. So that's how I got into that. I'm waiting, my life's going on, and college, and I was working. And so one day I'm on the way to work and starting my routine, pulled into a donut shop to have some coffee and a donuts, and the radio's on. News breaks into the radio station I was watching or listening to. The news comes on and says, stand by, an announcement from the Pentagon. It's coming soon. So I sat in the car and was eating and drinking, and she says, oh, all right, the announcement's been made. It's confirmed that they're activating 20,000 reservists. I think this was not to cause the draft to happen at the time. It was right after Tet. All right, so I went down to see my brother at the office, who had just gotten out of the Army and had been in Germany. I asked him, I said, what's going to go on with you? They're acting reserves. He says, nothing. I put 4 years inactive and I got 2 years inactive and I'm gone. So I go off to my first stop. News breaks in and says, more announcements coming, stand by. And so I'm listening, and the next announcement or two said, yep, Pentagon is going to announce what units are being activated. Precisely, she said, what National Guard units are being activated. Oh, I thought, sounds familiar. So I said, okay, so I guess a unit or units are going to be activated. 20, 30 minutes later, stand by because we have which units are going to be activated by name, National Guard units. And so I sat in the car and listened, and I thought, well, there's probably 100 National Guard units. And so I listened to the first one. It was so-and-so from someplace, National Guard. And I said, well, that's one roll of the dice down. And the next one was 1st of the 18th Armored Cavalry Squadron in Van Nuys. I raised my hand, that must be me. So at that point I said, okay, well, that's what I signed up for. Now I know. I went home, told my mother, and yeah, the rest. Oh, and that particular day, it's pretty chaotic in the news. So I called the Guard unit, the Armory, and said, so I'm listening to something on the radio here. We've been activated. What do you know? What are we going to do? He says, it's chaotic at this point. I'll call you this afternoon. I can just tell you this. Be here in 30 days with your duffel bag. So there I was. In that time, it was just an accepted by me and everybody else. And that's how I got into the Army, active duty. That's how I got activated. And so I showed up like everybody else, and off we went to training. The whole unit, it was an Armored Cavalry Squadron. And so we have infantry, armor, and artillery. I had, when I enlisted, taken the test and was training on the artillery. I had gone to artillery school in Oklahoma. So that's, the whole unit was supposed to go over like that. So I went up there and we trained and retrained and re-outfitted weaponry and so forth. And it was probably 8 months into it. And that was when Tet happened, in between when I went. And what they were doing was, instead of sending over all our guns and all our tanks and artillery, they picked out the MOS to replace you in country. So everything stayed there except the people. And so that's how I got to Vietnam.
Tell me about the first time you went to Vietnam, what you experienced when you got off the plane.
Oh, all right. Excuse me, we stopped at Hawaii, got the plane, kept going to Vietnam. About 2 o'clock in the morning, we're coming into land, we're just floating through the air. Announcement comes on and says, we're gonna be landing in about half hour, we'll be in Vietnam. Oh, 10, 15 minutes later, the airplane kind of floats and turns to the left. I thought, well, maybe he has to do that. Then the voice came on and said, we're gonna have to circle for a while until they shut off the artillery before we can land. That was fun because I thought, oh, it's 24/7, isn't it? I mean, the war. And so I stuck that in my head, the plane landed. And as you get up, and it wasn't like you flock out quickly, you just make your way out the airplane. When I got to the open door and the girls that fly the guys around, those wonderful ladies, a big gust of heat came in. And I thought, wow, we must be very close to the jet engines cooling down. There's a steel ramp going down, or a set of stairs. We go off very slowly because at the bottom, they're taking your information, your packet, and deciding where you're going to go, to what vehicle, to what next place. And as it slowly went down at the pace everybody was going, I was looking at everything around. They were lighting. It was a little small air base. Mm-hmm. And the guys were driving their trucks around with the duffel bags. And so I was trying to take it all in as much as I could. Now this is something I can't explain exactly. About the third or fourth step down, standing and waiting, a voice came into my head and talked to me. Now, and this is what the voice said. It just took me by surprise. It said, in this tone, "Oh no, not this again." It just fleeted right through my head. And I didn't know what that meant. I thought it meant something. I just said that, Larry, because it's a very interesting trip on that particular statement that my voice heard. Get down to the bottom and they take my packet, get in that truck, go there, put us in a pretty good sized place. And the next morning I did details, and while I was waiting for my real final orders, did, you know, the typical KP or laundry, and just was there for 3 days, just absorbing whatever I could around me. And so then the next thing was, today you're going up, get on the truck. Got in the truck, went up. We landed at an air base. They put us on an airplane, you know, facing the back and sitting on your duffel bags, and off we went. Don't know where we were going. It lands, we get another truck transported to another little small base. To this very day, I don't know what it did. There was no indication, just a lot of hooches, barrack hooches. You know, everybody knows what they are, just heavily fortified. Had no indication of what that was, and so didn't look scary that night. Just after watching the terrain all that day, when I say the terrain, I mean just sitting and waiting. And there were 3 other guys with me, 2 other guys in the holding barracks. And about 12:30, I says, well, I'm just gonna nod off and, you know, try and catch some shut-eye till the next day. Now, half hour later, somebody walks through the door, or the opening that where a door would be, starts yelling, "Everybody up, formation, formation, out there." And I go, oh, who has formations, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning? So that's one of those wonderments. I found out because I went to the formation. The 3 of us walked out the door. There were 2 or 3 other barracks for the permanent party, and these guys were streaming out of those barracks and lining up in a field in front of us in a formation. So we stood at the back of the formation because we didn't know where to go. Now, the first sergeant comes up, snaps us to attention, and says, you know, stand by, we're out here, we're waiting for Major so-and-so from S2 to come out and give us an update. Now, I'm thinking, I don't know how often this happens in Vietnam at 2 o'clock. I don't know. Understand my position? I don't know what's happening exactly. So the fellow drives up, gets out of his Jeep, and the guy must have been 8 feet. He's just a big, tall guy. Gets introduced, and he says, I'm Major so-and-so from S2, and we've been watching the situation for the last 4 hours. We have been receiving occasional incoming mortars, occasional small arms fire, and the strip flares are going off. Well, I knew from training that's something meaningful. So, and I hadn't seen the flares. When I walked out that door that night, I saw flares, and I thought, what's going on? Oh, they must be trying to keep somebody down and keeping them from moving. So that goes by, makes the statement, and leaves. First sergeant walks up. Now, there's maybe 120 guys, permanent party there. And he walks up and snaps us to attention, and he says, all right, decision's been made. We're going from, I think it was yellow alert, to red alert. And then he yells, get to your fighting holes now. That's fine if you know where if you have a fighting hole. So these guys scattered into their barracks, and they're coming out with their gear, jackets or things, and they're trying to run to their defensive position. Well, the 3 of us are back there going, what do we do? So we're looking alone, and we were. First sergeant sees us, comes storming up and says, what are you doing here? I told you to get going, get to your fighting holes. I could hardly talk because I was like this. And one of the kids there goes, first sergeant, and we're in the holding barracks. And the sergeant just goes, as though he doesn't have enough problem at that moment trying to keep the whole thing going, whatever their protocols were. And he says, well, go get your gear, and where are your weapons? And on my mind went, yeah, I don't have a fighting hole, I don't have a weapon, and I don't know where I'm at. And so we told them they have not been issued weapons. He says, well, go get what you do have, you're gonna be running ammo all night. Another strange announcement, because my thought was, and I'm not trying to be funny, or it was like, gonna be running ammo all night. And I thought, does that mean they're gonna run out? I remember that thought. And I thought, and just exactly where do we run it to? Who knows? Well, went over and sat by the ammo dump all night. Nothing got any more difficult than that. My unprofessional perception is that Charlie was just either in a harassment deal or was probing to see the response of that unit, S2, and what they do, they put him in defensive positions. And so the next day came, and so I did that day. The next day, they put me on another truck to go somewhere up north. Did that drive. We're headed, I actually don't know where I was. All I know, I was north of that little air base, and the terrain changed, a lot more rice paddies. We're getting a little more into the mountains of the highlands, kind of, I thought. And as we go up, I think it was about a 60-mile ride. I'm rubbernecking, I'm taking in everything I can, and all it was is rice paddies and hooches and people on bicycles. And I noticed up there that looked like about 20 helicopters off the side of the road. I mean, this is out elevation, rice paddy elevation, and they were in the rice paddy, not doing anything. They weren't moving. And I thought, that's interesting. And on this side of the road was a mountain hill's been carved out pretty well, a lot of protection, and I could see some of the guns. It was an artillery unit. Now, we pull in the gate. It's a courier truck, 3/4 ton courier truck, and the driver pulls in and says, okay, wait here. I'll be back in 15, 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere. And he has to go and mail or any information he has to do. He comes back. In the meantime, I got out of the truck, stretched my legs, because over to the left, I'd seen a medical hooch. Big red cross on it in the circle. And there's a guy sitting out in front that kind of interested me because he was the only guy there. And he was sitting in a lawn chair. He had flip-flops on. He had that white material you put to stop sunscreen, dark glasses, and he's just kicked back. And I thought, what's this? So I walked over to the hooch, but I wanted to start a conversation with him, and I did. And I says, is this the medical hooch? He goes, yeah. And he says, did you get off that truck? I says, yeah, I just did. He says, oh, that's going to LZ Pony. And I said, I don't know where I'm going. I haven't been knowing that for 4 or 5 days. Oh, that's going to LZ Pony. So the driver comes down and says, get your gear out, we're staying tonight. The road to LZ Pony's been mined, and they're gonna clear it, they're gonna sweep it. And I'm thinking, this must be a war. A war has names of roads that you're gonna go drive across. I'm going, good guys, go clear it. So they didn't have anything to do with us. They gave us a detail, which was carrying 5-gallon buckets of mixed concrete up a hill because they were building a slab up there for somebody. We did that all day, and we were told we're going to leave the next day. At the end of that day, I looked at my hands and went, wow, I got a lot of blisters. You know, I missed out of the States. I hadn't done anything. And so next day comes, we take our bags, throw them in the truck. He comes down and says, yeah, get your bags out. We're staying another day. They want to sweep it one more time. My thought was, good idea. Good idea. Did that all day. End of the day, he says, okay, we'll be leaving tomorrow morning. And I looked at my hands and I went, looks like somebody held them over a fire. They were just blistered beyond belief. Next day, get in the truck and go north. I want to go back and say one thing that I remember about meeting that medic that I talked to you about in front of the hooch. And I asked him, I says, oh, how long you been here? He says, well, this is my second tour. I was sent back to the States, but they didn't like me there and didn't want me around. And then he says, have you ever heard of Dacto? I says, yeah, I've heard of that. The Battle of Dacto was pretty memorable. And he says, yeah, I was in that, one of the medics. I was one of the 15 medics on that hill. Only 3 of us walked off, and I was one of them, he said. So that was a kind of an introductory day or two for me. We go down what's called Pony Road. It's in the Bong Song district. Going north, the ocean was on the right, which, like 8 or 10 miles out there. And then this way was the highlands. 7 miles down that, just driving through jungle, high jungle, and remnants of French buildings and some activity there much before that war. And as we came through, and you could see past the vegetation, just high tree vegetation. And then we're looking across a rice paddy, and up on that lower part of that hill was another carved out area, dirt, so forth, bunkers, etc. And so we went through there and drove across the rice paddy. There's a road on the dike, and got up to I'm sorry, it's not funny, I guess, but we go up. There's a little airstrip there that had put in the 1967 area when it was the 1st Cav and 173rd was trying to pacify the area south, because about that time, America decided we're going to have to be in this war. We need to have transportation and safe transportation facilities, and we're going to move a lot of stuff. So we're going to be moving trucks up there. So they went down and literally pacified it, meaning they tried to get the VC scared and away and dead, so they wouldn't be rocketing and taking out the convoys. Get up a little airstrip on this. I go towards the driver goes in the gate of the LZ. And it's an artillery. There's 4 large artillery pieces. But the gate said, the big sign was a welcome sign. And it said, welcome to LZ Pony, the home of death and destruction. I thought, how nice. And so take us in, unload us. You go to this gun, you go to that gun, you'll be there. And so that was that first week or so. What I could leave out, but I won't, if you don't mind, is before I went to LZ Pony, I had been at location. I was put in another location. Found out that was a logistics area and repair area for artillery. So I'm in this location, just as new as you can be. All of a sudden, there's a midday formation called. And all the guys that live there, they start loading up the formation, and I better trot up there and get in line so I'm not wandering around and they don't. So as I came to the back of the line, just trying to find a spot to step in, if somebody else was coming, well, I beat him to it. I wasn't racing, I was just trying to get there. And he came, and just as I stepped in, he's right there. And I just looked at him like, and then I turned around again as he was walking away, and he looked at me with the most angry face I've ever seen. It literally, at my time, he says, that was the look of somebody who wants to kill you. Somehow he was offended by me getting in line there. So the day goes by, and did nothing but watch what's ever going on. The next day, had a formation, and they issued me a weapon because I had not been issued a weapon. And then that night, the evening formation, they said, you call the names, I'm going on guard duty. Done that before in training and practice, right? We know, get on the truck and get dropped off. So I'm being dropped off. It's a tower I'm on. It's a guard tower. There's 3 of us. One of the guys of the 3 wasn't there at that time, and the sergeant of the guard said, yeah, you're going to get a guy later on, and we already know about it. He's cleared it, so you guys take care of it until later. So I went up first and just sat there looking around. Not much to look at. It was dark, few lights from the barracks back there. And, I came off my shift and walked down, and the next guy goes up. And so what I did was, towers have big legs, big, thick legs. And I was tired, so I sat down, leaned against one of the legs, put my M14 up against this leg. I didn't want to put it on my lap or throw it in the dirt, so I put it there. Yeah, an hour or so later, the guy on top comes down, didn't say anything, just walked around, and I thought, well, maybe he's got to take a relief. And so he comes back and walks up. And a little while later, just before, it was certainly before midnight, he comes down again, no dialogue. And I thought, well, maybe he's been drinking too much and has to go bathroom again. And that was all until after 12 o'clock sometime. He comes down again, and he walks over the same location, which is the other leg, just past it about 10. And he starts yelling, and he's yelling out at the perimeter. He's yelling, jacked up for some reason. I got jacked up with him, so I jumped up and I thought, what should I do? I don't know what he's yelling at. So I went over, he ignored me and is yelling. I went, okay. I ran back, got my weapon, except for one thing. It wasn't there. Where'd it go? I want you to know, when I got to that, reached around that leg and went, and I'm patting the ground, I'm going, and this guy's yelling, and we're in Vietnam, and that's all I could figure. So I got up, and as when I went back to him, to more dialogue, what's happening, there were 4 bodies, silhouettes coming from the wire through the field. And I thought, I couldn't make them out. Then they got closer. Then, because the lights back at the barracks area, I got a glimpse of one of the faces. And the face was the guy whose spot I had stepped in. The guy didn't look very happy. And there's 3 other guys with him. As they get closer, he's starting to yak at me. But 2 of his guys walked right. I thought they were going to just walk up to me. They just walked right by me, pinned my arms behind my back. I could not move. In fact, they were like that. I could not move. I'm not a real tall guy. I'm kicking the dirt, trying to do something. And this fellow, and I will call him Jack because that is his name. So Jack comes over. He starts slamming his finger in my chest, punching me, starts cussing. Who do you think you're effing with? You're done. Ba, 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 ba. I'm going, I'm trying to absorb this. I'm in Vietnam. I'm on friendly side. This guy's threatening me. These guys are pinning me back. I thought he was very serious. And he was. And so that continued. And there's pretty much a lot of shouting, those guys and me. And I yelling at him, what's your problem? What's your problem? Now, I put a scenario together. The problem is I'm not going to be here much longer. That was my problem. Well, the fellow who came in late had heard all this noise, yelling. And I caught him out of the corner of my eyes, and he's walking, yelling at us, hey, quiet down. What's going on here? Just knock quiet down. And I'm watching his face in the same glow of the lights. First, he's walking pretty cocky, and we're going to quiet this down until he saw 4 guys who shouldn't be on that place. And 2 of them have this little guy strapped. And so one of the guys that were accosting me said, no, everything's okay here. And it was just like a relief on his face. Okay, he just did a 180 and went back to a one-man bunker over there. And then they got on top of me. The M14 that disappeared was now stuck in my neck. The guy came out of that little group, and I'm thinking, I'm done. Probably gonna done. All they gotta do is say, Yeah, there's the new guy. He just got here. He got off a guard. He forgot to put his safety on. He tripped, fell down, shot himself in the neck. I don't know, that's going through my head. And, but because they got found out, the guy who came in, because they found that out, I think the worst didn't happen because they would have had a witness. Now, all four of these guys, it turns out, well, figured they think they'd have a witness, they'd have to kill two. How would they do that? They both trip off and shoot themselves? And so Jack, this guy's got me. He just walks up and he says, let him go. And he threw me over my back, shoved me over. I rolled down a tiny little embankment. And he says, I'll see you again. Okay, so that was fine. And I was so cool about it. I said, hey, I want my weapon. And he said, get out while you're still alive. I went, oh, golly, I think I'll go. So I went to the guard shack, said, I'm coming off this, whatever it was, OP, whatever it was. And I says, and somebody stole my weapon. And the guy looks at me like, who stole your weapon? What do you mean somebody stole your weapon? He says, just we'll deal in the morning. So that was that night, a very memorable night. And the next morning started another day. And then I found out, learned that Jack was the mafia. Or he was the black market guys that run around. Anything you want, he's got access to it. Drugs, booze, food. And so that day, or it was the next day, they put me on a truck with a weapon. I was so happy. That's when I went up, actually to LZ Pony, which where I dropped off and told you coming through the gate, big guns. I give the, the guys who want the paperwork, here's my paperwork. And she says, okay, you're going to gun one, you're going to all these different guys in the truck. And so that's how that started. That was my entry to LZ Pony in Vietnam. And the rest I can tell you about was kind of unpredictable.
I've got to ask you, what unit or division were you with? What company were you with? And what was your rank? And
what unit? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the 1st Field Forces. 1st Field Forces, 7th Battalion. I ended up in A Battery, 1st Field Force, 2nd Battalion of the 1st Field Forces. And I got on this gun, so that's where I was.
And so you were trained as an artillery or a mortar?
Was I trained?
You're at artillery? You were in artillery.
Sorry?
Were you in artillery?
I'm sorry, Larry.
Okay. Were you at mortars, artillery?
Oh, what did I do?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I was just an artilleryman.
Yeah, you went to Fort Sill. You went to Fort Sill. You trained. So you're like a 13 Echo or whatever.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of guns.
Yeah.
And I trained on 105s like everybody does in training.
What was your rank? A PFC?
Well, I was PFC. Mm-hmm. So what happened was, before I left the United States, I was an E4, Spec 4 assistant gunner on a 105 self-propelled. That's what our unit had.
Okay.
A guard unit. Well, I was invited one day to go see a sergeant, and he sat me down and said, well, you're doing a good job. We'd like to move you up a rank and send you to NCO school. It's a month-long deal, so when you go over, you'll be a... And I kind of didn't want to do that. And I let him know that I wasn't going to want to do that. And he says, well, it's a good opportunity. Now, my feelings were that I'm going to go over there not knowing anything, have 3 stripes, and that's not fair to the guys who already know the ropes, and they got some yahoo here who went to school. So I denied it, and they didn't like that. In fact, they got real frustrated, and for 2 days. And then that day that I told them that I didn't want to I wanted another day to think about it. Well, the next day I told him, yeah, I'd rather pass on that. I'm really fine. The guys and I get along. I know the gun. I'm the only guy in the battery that can field strip a breech in a 155. I says, I know my stuff. I'm assistant gunner. I can do stuff. Still not good enough because somehow I disgraced him or made him unhappy. So I leave that conversation, and in a half hour, door opens in the day room, and I hear my name called. Get all your gear, you're going out to Yakima, Washington for night fire, and you'll be driving, and get all your cold weather gear. And you're going to be out driving one of the officers around who's watching the night fire, who's responsible for all that stuff.
Now, are you still in Vietnam here?
No.
Story? Okay.
No, we went back to something else.
Okay, let's go back to Vietnam. Okay.
You want to go back to Vietnam?
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about the combat you experienced. What was the worst combat you had in Vietnam?
Okay. Yeah, we'll go right there. Up until the date we left off, we'll say, Larry, I met the guys that night. Next day, they took me, because the shift was they put me on a shift. They go up and they're going to teach me the gun. Well, they're going to introduce me to people, and then I walked up with this fellow that was in my gun section. That I had just joined his gun section. And and I walk up there, and now I see this gun is very, very big. And then I looked at the ammo bunker, which is directly behind the gun. And I looked at that and went, the ammunition is very, very big. 140 pounds, about this tall. So they said, well, okay, well, you fuse it like this, you kick the bottom thing off that protects what's called an ogive, and did not have a fire mission that morning. Next day, first fire mission. And so how you move the projectile up to the back of the gun is, at that time, they had a tray, semicircle tray with handles on it, and both guys would one guy would take one side and you tilt it on there. You go to the back of the gun, a hydraulic arm comes out, lifts it up, and you run back and do the same thing over and over again. The first fire mission, I had to use the hands. Those are the ones that 4 days ago looked like terrible. And it was really painful, and some of them they popped and were bleeding. But you're new, so don't say anything. You're part of the crew, and you better show them you're going to perform. Second or third day, I had gotten to know the gunner, and I'm standing there and I go, I just hold my hands up. And he looks and he says, what happened? And I told him briefly. He says, you get to the medic. So I did. The medic told his assistant, get his hands clean and disinfect them, and don't do anything for 2 or 3 days. See me in 3 days. Okay, so they arranged for another guy to take my spot. Now, 10 days after arriving in that location, I was walking up. Walking to the gun, which is up a slight hill, maybe 15 feet higher than the road. Nice, man. And so I'm now getting acquainted with the guys. And we're sitting out there waiting for a fire mission. It was evening, late, it was dark. And waiting for it. And so we hear a lot of yelling coming from the other gun. And it had a better view at the end of the rice paddy was a village. It had a clearer view. So they said, hey, look at this. And they're yelling like that. So I got up because the other guys got up. And I walked in there, red tracers coming from that village. Rice paddy stops, hooch is here, red tracers going through it. And I'm trying to figure out, do these guys know anything about this kind of activity? And I'm thinking these are red tracers. And so they burned the village down. They just shot it up and cremated it. And so in fact, I don't know if that meets the criteria, but that's the first time I saw the animal at work. And then I got to know the guys. That morning, after that burn down, when I'd come up to the gun kind of early morning, there were 2 Hueys, 2 medevacs out there as close as they could get to the village, to the end of the strip. And they were Arvins that were operating, and they were taking stretchers off, and then going back to the village. So I don't know what happened in the village that night. But a little while later, I'm back over with my guys. We're just shooting the breeze, waiting for a fire mission. And I said, geez, what happened last night? Does that happen a lot? I'm curious. And no, I says, no, that was just Charlie trying to tell them, don't be friendly with the Americans. Oh, that's a real quick conversation. I go, oh, yeah, uh-huh. And then I decided to ask a question. And all these guys I knew only, a few days. And I says, I got a question. I says, I don't know where I am. I know that Saigon's down that way. He says, yep. So my friend, turns out to be a great friend of mine, stands up. Yeah, that's right. 200 some odd miles, that's Saigon. And he's standing and he goes, and up there in Da Nang, that's 75 miles from Da Nang. And then he goes, he's from California too. That's how we got to be good buddies. He goes, California, 9,000 miles. Yeah. And then he turns around and he does a big sweep, all the hills around us. And he says to me, you see all those hills? Sure. Those belong to Charlie. Well, that's nice to know. So that's a sort of being initiated with the group. That's where I was. And it was a four-gun artillery unit, 2 175s, 2 8-inch. And we could cover so much territory because of the range, 25 miles if needed. And we mostly always shot into the Central Highlands. Mm-hmm. Whoever called in, if we could get to it, we would, or somebody else could get to it. So if that's, you want more of that thing maybe?
Well, tell me.
Yeah, good.
Did you work with the helicopters at all?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So did you lose any friends over there? Wounded or killed?
Yeah, but not for my time there. Yeah,
what years were you there again, tell me?
Pardon me?
What year were you in Vietnam? 67?
68.
And 69?
68 and just, yeah. No, I only had 8 months to do.
Okay.
I had 10 months to do when I got there because of all the time I spent on active duty training or with the Guard. So I had 10 months, and I think I was supposed to get out on September 10th, something like that. This might be interesting information. So when you're there, there's a rule. You can get 2 months early out if you're accepted into college. The government said, we'll do that for you guys, except for National Guard.
Okay.
Well, so I was aware of that. And so I was 6, 7 months into it. And you get a newspaper there, the Army Times, you can read news, weather, and sports. And a little down in the corner, I read something that caught my eye. It said the word National Guard, and they read the article, and the article said, they've changed the government or the military's changed their rules. If you're National Guard can get out if you're accepted into a college. I think I still have that piece I cut out. Right, sent a letter home, or it may have been a recording at the time. My dad gets it. I had been pulled out of school. When I got activated, I was right in the middle of the classroom.
Right.
And so he goes down there and approaches the office and says, my son's there, he can get out 2 months earlier if you accept him back into college. The girl took him across to a fellow that was higher up. My dad told him the problem. He says, follow me. He takes me over there to the counter across the hallway. He says, find his name. He's going to come back to college. And we want that piece of paper today. I heard that from my parents after I got home. Mm-hmm. So we sent that, they sent that, went to my battery commander's people, and they said, you're out of here. You're short.
So that. Tell me about then your last day in Vietnam, and then you went home?
My last day, yeah, I was out, I was a civilian. Mm-hmm. The day I got out, and that was September something.
But in Vietnam, your last day, was it uneventful?
In Vietnam, was it what?
Was your last day uneventful?
Yes. Well, let's look at it from this perspective. Yeah, that question would be very logical, wouldn't it? Because if you're talking to Jerry and his unit, was it an eventful, or were you guys in a firefight, or what were you doing? No. Let me introduce something to this conversation, if you don't mind. You can cut it out. I have this idea that there's every occupation and every situation in the world over there, depending on, and this is how I put it in my head, you can be either at the tip of the spear, which everybody knows is heavy-duty combat, very dangerous. You can be at the rear, you can be with the rear and the gear, all logistical and typewriter guys or whatever they're doing, or some base where they repair stuff, or somewhere in between. And there's a lot of in between. So if you can see it, rear of the gear, point of the spear, rear with the gear, or somewhere in between. All kinds of possibilities, all kinds of busyness or combat or no combat or very little. And so I put myself somewhere in between, hone it down to what was the first time you saw combat? And can we say that combat is if you are being shot at or something else? So no, I never shot anybody and nobody shot me.
Good.
I'm an artillery base. Now, some artillery bases weren't very lucky. This one, just by the fourth part of that is rear with the gear, point of the spear, rear with the gear, somewhere between. And the rest of it, in any case, it's just the luck of the draw, whether you come home or not. Now, the guys at the tip, a lot of opportunities for, not coming home. So that's how I would categorize my experience.
That's good. I like that. That's very good. You sound like a poet.
And I don't know it.
And
Is that how that?
what you write. But have you ever been to the Vietnam Wall?
Yeah.
Tell me about the first time you went there, what you experienced, and why you went.
So the first time I went to the wall, it's been up quite a while, and I went to look for my friends. You mentioned I had 3. So my first was my guy, the guys that I knew. I just broke my heart. And that was my experience. And I walked away with this, and many times I conclude this, Larry. In fact, I'm fond of, or I use this, and people say, oh, you were in Vietnam, yeah, and so forth and so on. And this is what comes out of my head after being there several times, was I say to the people, or ask them if they've ever been there. No, or yes or no, whatever it is. I said, well, I've been. And what I noticed was, my name is not on that wall. And how do you be thankful and sad at the same time? There's Byron, there's Fred, there's Gary. It's real hard. So yeah, I've been to the wall, and that's my take on it.
That's good.
When I came home, do you want to go there, or do you want to go back to time they ambushed the Arvins? And
We've got about 20 minutes, so I'm thinking here, how has Vietnam changed you over the years?
how what?
When you went to Vietnam and you came home, were you a different person?
Yeah.
How?
So I have all these imaginations like everybody does. I'm going to come home and I'm going to sleep in a bed and have sheets and toilets and stuff. First problem I had, or the first indication, was I met at the LA airport my mother and father. It's commercial airline, like a big airport has. I offboarded with maybe 5 or 6 other guys in uniform, and the rest were civilians, and they were going to get the next flight or meeting their loved ones or going getting their luggage. So I'm waiting thinking, well, where are my parents? I mean, you'd think they'd be here. I'm coming home. A few minutes went by and a few more minutes went by, and I'm really scratching my head. Maybe a flat tire, and there were no cell phones. So I'm standing there, and then all of a sudden my mother comes out of this, what's left of the crowd, and she walks over, big hug. My dad's right behind her, shakes my hand. Let's jump forward. When you asked the question, was I different? Let's jump forward 9 years. So that night, family dinner with aunts and uncles and so forth. I go to bed about 11:30. And I thought, this is it, man. The Freedom Bird got me here. This is the big white bed. I'm going to sleep. And I couldn't sleep. I thought, that's really weird because I'm tired as can be. And I thought, well, why? It wasn't clear to me at the time. Why can't I sleep? My dream, my fantasy was, yeah, you go home, sleep for a couple of weeks. I said, slow down, Paul. What's going on in your head? What are you thinking about? I wrote it off at first to jet lag. That didn't last long because I said, now concentrate. You should have been rolled over then and just wait it out. I started to listen to what my thoughts were. And they were, look, I was 24 years old at the time. And everybody else was younger. So I call them my boys, the gun crew. They were a damn good gun crew. They were good kids. And that's what I was doing. I says, I'm worried about them. I'm worried about them. When I left that LZ that morning, it's 7 miles on a dirt road. We came down Patty, across that dike, and then just jungle all the way to I started to cry. Yeah. See, about 2 months before my day to go, about 2 months before that, we just missed a rocket attack. It was the evening, and I was off shift. All things are normal. My gun started up. Diesel motors, hydraulics. Then another gun started up. And then another one. So I got up and I started to go up to the gun line. And other guys were doing that too. This is unusual. So I get up there and then they told me to back down a little bit. And I had a tape recorder with me. I have a little bit of tape of this. They had to turn the guns around 180 degrees. We always shot there. Tonight, we're shooting there. And I just waited, and finally it was silent except for the engine. I heard the word fire, fire. All 4 guns simultaneously with like a thunderclap. Whoa. So we're all waiting what happens next. 4 volleys, 4 rounds, and then quieted down. Nobody knew what happened. Nobody knew why we did that until the next morning. The guys who did know, FTC guys, on the gun, talking to the gun. So as the morning starts to unfold, FTC calls up each gun and says what's going on out there is they have teams that go out after combat, body counters and so forth. So they had a team out there and they were starting to get casualties. A casualty count. I think it was 11, 12, but they're still counting, they said. So they're gonna wait. They call them confirmed casualties. Little more time goes by, they're up to they're over 15, 16 confirmed out there. But they're still gonna look. They stopped looking at 23. They said because we can't put any more parts together to figure out who belongs to what leg, body, torso. So what these guys did, and let's bless somebody right now called the LERPs. Mm-hmm. We did what we always do, pointing in that direction. No one ever bothered us. No one ever shot us, threw a mortar at us. They figured if they go way back there and point rockets at us, we won't be thinking about it. The LRPs were out there. We're a 6-man team, no contact, keep your eyes open. These guys were coming out of the brush of the hill in the flat area, it was a platoon of rockets, setting them up. They called it. Luckily, they got the grids right. 4 volleys, 4 rounds, all gone. We were not attacked. So that's about that. And coming up to the gun one night, rice paddies here. There's an ARVN camp base, heavily fortified, a lot of bunkers. Used to belong to the Special Forces. And that was up there. Well, I'm walking up in my usual path, and there's tracers coming towards that encampment. And there were green tracers. And there were quite a few of them. I figured there must be 10 or 15 guys, but I couldn't figure out why they'd be shooting that direction because, you know, it was all covered with buildings, impenetrable, bunkers. So then they upped the volume, and it was a lot. And I thought, oh, there's ARVN patrols that go out at night, perimeter defense patrols, and they plop themselves down everywhere or in different places. The volume went up, and I went, uh-huh. And the bullets weren't going over the paddy towards that defensive position, were a little higher up. They were like sweeping the dikes. And so they poured on some more. And I went, God. Nothing coming back at them until these guys, the ARVN, had to do something because these guys doubled and doubled, and they're just raking it with lead tracers. Green, we have red. Red finally had to do it. They had to stand up and fight. They stood up as soon as that recon by fire. Well, here comes a tracer. They're right there. The volume doubled again. It must have been 40 individual, and each one was every 5 rounds comes out of there. Had to be just a mass of lead. Didn't last very long, and you could see their numbers. They're trying to load what ammo they had, if they had much. They weren't expecting an attack like that. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, the ARVNs dropped their fire out. These guys, it was just all green. And then they just sort of got petered out and all gone. And it was over. And then the airplane comes in with the guns. What do they call him? Snoopy or something like that. He flies over, just raking the paddies, that infrared stuff. So that's all we knew about it that night. Next morning, I'm going back up to my little bunker. I always seem to go from here to there. And there's a helicopter on the other side of the bunker, and never see one there. Well, I made my buddy go up there. We climb on top of the bunker so we can see what's going on. There's a medevac, and over here are 2 stretchers, 2 dead ARVN, and Vietnamese village family people, wives, brothers, mothers. They're huddled around and they're just moaning and groaning and, with the sadness naturally of what happened. I remember that one of the girls went over to the body and just hugged him and kissed him, and it was a total loss. So see, I saw some tracers run around the valley or the paddies, but never at us. That's an experience I would not know how. Oh, I've talked to boys, men. I've never had that experience, and it was luck of the draw. It's just simply a luck of the draw. Wasn't they weren't trying to win the war their own way with what we had, which was just a couple of hundred guys. I never experienced that.
Can you finish your story about how it changed you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I told you the airport. I'm at the airport. They take me home. So the next morning, Dad said, here's the keys. Go see your friends. I was going to start college in 3 weeks. So I saw friends, and then the next week, I went looking for a job, and so now my first day of college. This is the college I had gone to for a year and a half, so I knew it inside and out. A very large college on a big hill. Down here is a freeway. Next hill over is like this hill. It had a little building on it. I used to walk up 185 steps when I was there because I liked running it. And it was fun, and I did that. So that morning, well, here I am, first day of school, and I'm walking up the steps and starting over. Halfway up, I feel something really weird in my gut. Just alarms went off, and I could not figure out why. And so I continued to walk, and I went, no, what is this? And it was starting to really scare me because the kids were coming, other people were walking down, young kids, got their books, they're all in college. I was there once, but now I've been someplace else in between. And so I looked over my shoulder to the hill over there. For some reason, I felt it was coming from there. As I turned back, there's a big bush, tree-like bush, thick. As I went from this way to sideways, I stopped at the bush. I looked at the bush. It wasn't a bush. It was Vietnam. Technicolor lifetime fire mission. And I am standing there with the kids running down, and I'm watching Hutch, Belmore, O'Connell, right there at the edge of my perimeter of the gun pit. My head just went cuckoo, if you know what I mean. I didn't know. I was shuddering. I don't know what happens. Oh, when does this go away? Does it go away? So I started to walk up. And I walked up, and something else bugged me. I turned around. I couldn't figure it out. When I turned around, when I woke up, we'll say, from turning around, when I became conscious again, I had crawled under the railings of the steps on the hills covered with thick ivy. I was under the railing, holding onto this railing, didn't know what to do. I'm watching kids walk down, and they're looking at me like, that's odd. And I'm going, well, that is really odd to myself. I'm going, Paul, you can do something, find out something. So finally I said, well, you better get out from underneath this fence and try to figure it out later. So I guess it's a flashback of something, something brought me back there. I'm making a class, and school starts, and it's all over again. I want to tell you something about that incident, but it happened about 10 years ago that relates to it. I met a guy. He was doing a project called Take Me Home Huey. It was honoring all vets with using one of the guys, one of the helicopter guys that knew helicopters inside and out. We're sitting down talking while some of the crew's doing other work. We introduce ourselves, we're talking, and he says, yeah, your name sounds really familiar. I says, well, I used to live up in such and such. He says, oh, I worked up there for the fire department, the whole county, but I knew your name was familiar. So then I told him, I told him about helicopters and the noise, and that day that I just told you, all of a sudden, something was wrong. And he said, oh, you were there. Yeah, he says, the college is on this hill. The other hill is the LA County headquarters. And he says, what you heard, says, they have helicopters there. You can't see them because they're a little bit over the hill. They have helicopters there. You kept looking back, and you heard it, but you couldn't see it. Well, I heard something I didn't know was a helicopter. He says, well, what they do is they warm up, rev up, they're ready to fly, and they move, and they pull pitch, I think they call it, and it just starts to flutter. And he said, you saw that? I said, yeah, I guess it was, because it was a helicopter that I finally saw after I went through all the crazy stuff. Yeah, that day. And so was that one of the things that was different? Yeah, there's a lot of things. Well, yeah, I was a loner now. I was kind of a loner guy trying to figure out what's going on here. I'd go to the picnic table outside the cafeteria, and then I'd look around and make sure everything's safe. I ate my sandwich, and one day I caught myself. I'm eating this sandwich, and the library's over here, and some people walk out. 3 girls, and I'm watching them intensely. And then I turn my head. I've seen enough. Over here is a music building. This guy walks out in a plaid shirt, and he's headed this way. And so I turned back to see where the girls were, because I also kept turning around my back. I'm on a college campus. I don't know what was going on. I noticed that, there's only 3 girls. Where's the 4th one? She was in a green sweater and she was headed toward another building. I turned back for the guy in the plaid shirt. I go, okay, where's this guy? No, I'm not looking that way too much. I'm going, he's going around behind me. In my head. No, he was going to his class. At that point, I said, you need help. You need help. And so those were just one of the many things that kind of triggered stuff. I went to get help. This is cathartic.
Yeah.
Boy.
It's good. Yeah. Amen. Okay, Paul, when you're ready, just look in here and give us...
Am I looking at the camera? Okay.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. I want to shake your hand on camera and thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, sure.
And thank you for your story. I'll be a good steward of your story, okay?
I know you will. I've seen what you do. Yes, thank you.